Wake of the Bellerophon by T.B. Dahl. Chapter 18. The Expedition. The North Sea did not welcome them. For 6 days Defiance battled contrary winds and heavy seas, her timbers groaning as she drove into grey water that seemed determined to prove the Baltic unnecessary by killing them first. The fleet laboured onward, sails reduced, then increased, then reduced again. Pumps worked. Rigging strained, men cursed, spat, hauled, slept where they could, and rose again when the pipe called them. Thomas discovered quickly that Lieutenant's life was not midshipman's life with better cloth. It was broader, heavier, and less forgiving. His watches stretched through rain, cold, and darkness. He checked station against the fleet, attended sail handling, supervised repairs, inspected magazines, examined gun tackle, reviewed watch bills, corrected petty negligence before it became expensive, and learned that authority did not reduce labour. It merely made more labour his fault. By the 7th day the weather moderated. The Danish coast appeared faint on the horizon. Thomas stood with Haddock on the quarterdeck, charts open beneath weighted corners. "The score," Haddock said, pointing. "Northern tip of Denmark. From there Kattegat, then the Sound between Denmark and Sweden. Shoals both sides. And channel shifting. Dangerous for one ship, worse for a fleet large enough to think itself important." Captain Murray joined them. "Admiral Parker signals all captains aboard at noon. We shall likely receive final orders." Thomas spent the morning helping Haddock prepare navigational recommendations. At noon, Murray departed for the flagship, leaving Parkington in command. Thomas used the time to inspect his gun crews. The gun deck smelled of sawdust, tar, hemp, iron, damp wool, powder traces, and men. Gun captains drilled crews through loading until their movements became less action than reflex. Stevens, once a fellow midshipman, and now master's mate, commanded one of the 32-pounders. "They have been practicing in darkness," Thomas observed. Stevens grinned. "Blindfolded, too, though Peters loaded his own hat once, which I count as experimental." "Did it improve range?" "Not enough to repeat." The men worked well. They watched Thomas differently now, but not unkindly. He was no longer one of the young gentlemen passing through their labour toward rank. He was an officer who had bled before, worked before, and knew the difference between a clean gun for inspection and a gun ready to save a ship. Late that afternoon Murray returned and summoned the officers. His face was grave. "Gentlemen, Admiral Parker confirms our orders. We proceed to Copenhagen. The Danes have rejected the ultimatum." He unrolled a detailed chart of the harbour. The Danish fleet lies anchored along the shoals, supported by floating batteries and shore installations. Their position creates an interlocking field of fire over the main approach. Thomas leaned closer. The defence was well chosen. Natural hazards forced attacking ships into narrow water. Batteries multiplied the danger. A grounded ship under fire would become a slaughterhouse. "Our attack," Murray continued, "will be bold. Admiral Nelson proposes dividing the force. He will take the shallower draft ships against the southern end of the Danish line. Admiral Parker remains in reserve with heavier ships." He touched Defiance's station. "We are part of Nelson's squadron under Rear Admiral Graves, who transfers his flag to Defiance tomorrow. Our place will be near the rear of Nelson's line, engaging the southern defences." Murray looked at Haddock, then Thomas. "The attack requires precise navigation. We shall have boats ahead taking soundings, but responsibility for bringing Defiance safely into position rests heavily with you." "Aye, sir," Haddock said. "Aye, sir," Thomas echoed. The following morning dawned clear and cold as Rear Admiral Graves came aboard with his staff. Graves was tall, austere, and had the look of a man who considered comfort an argument against readiness. His flag broke at the fore. Captain Murray yielded the great cabin, as etiquette and necessity required. Graves summoned the officers. "Gentlemen, the Danish defences are formidable, but not impregnable. Admiral Nelson believes, and I concur, that a determined attack will carry the day. He outlined the plan more precisely, then Nahas turned to Thomas. "Mr. Oxenham." "Sir." "You will command the sounding boats tonight." Thomas felt attention shift toward him. "We require accurate depths along our planned approach. You will operate close to Danish positions. Patrol boats may be out. Batteries may fire if you are discovered. Take 4 boats, picked crews, muffled oars, no lights, return before dawn." "Aye, sir." The day passed in preparation. Thomas selected his crews carefully, men steady enough to be quiet, experienced enough to sound in darkness, and sensible enough to be frightened without making it public. Stevens would accompany him with charting materials. Leads were checked, oars muffled, dark clothing issued where possible, pistols loaded but hidden, orders given in low voices. The boats pulled away after dusk. The night was moonless, good for concealment, bad for not drowning. Defiance and the British fleet faded behind them until they became darker shapes within darkness. Ahead lay the Danish line, unseen at first, then appearing as black masses against faint shorelights. "Steady stroke," Thomas whispered. "No voices unless necessary." The boats moved in line. At intervals, leads went over silently. Depths were whispered, recorded, marked. Bearings taken from shorelights, masts, and shadows. Twice they lay still while Danish craft passed nearby. Once a dog barked from somewhere ashore, and every man in Thomas's boat seemed to stop breathing at once. Near the southern end of the Danish line, disaster came close enough to hear oars. A patrol boat emerged from behind a moored vessel, lantern swinging. "Down," Thomas breathed. The men flattened themselves. The lantern beam moved across the water. For a moment it seemed to rest on them. Thomas lay with his cheek against damp wood and felt his own heartbeat in his throat. Discovery would mean capture if fortunate, musketry if not. The lantern moved on. The patrol passed within 50 yards and vanished into darkness. Only then did Thomas allow the boats to continue. They completed the final soundings and withdrew. Back aboard Defiance before dawn, Thomas and Stevens worked through the remaining darkness, transferring findings to the charts. The result revealed what they needed, a narrow but navigable channel that would bring the attacking ships within effective range of the southern Danish line. At dawn, Thomas presented the chart to Haddock, Graves, and Murray. Graves studied it long, then nodded. "Excellent work, Mr. Oxenham. This confirms Nelson's assessment. We can close." Praise felt less like reward than another weight added. All day the fleet prepared. Guns run out and checked, powder brought up, splinter nets rigged, sand spread, fire buckets filled. Surgeons readied the cockpit. Carpenters placed plugs and shot mats. Signal flags fluttered between ships as Nelson coordinated from HMS Elephant. Thomas, too keyed by exhaustion to rest properly, supervised his division until evening. Then, in his cabin, he wrote a short letter home. He wrote of duty, confidence in ship and crew, affection for them all, and nothing of fear except what lay between lines. He sealed it, placed it in his chest, and lay down fully clothed. Sleep came like a thief and left before dawn. Briggs woke him. "Begging your pardon, sir. Captain requests all officers on deck. Fleet preparing to move." Thomas washed, dressed, and went up. The eastern sky paled. British ships formed for attack. Signals broke from Nelson's flagship, Advance. Slowly, magnificently, the squadron moved toward Copenhagen. Thomas stood with Haddock, leadsman stationed in the chains. "Keep to the channel," Haddock said. 4 fathoms or deeper, less, and we risk grounding." "By the Mark 5, sang the leadsman. Defiance followed in Nelson's line, edging through water that looked innocent because water always does, before revealing its opinions. Ahead, the Danish fleet waited at anchor. Ships, hulks, floating batteries, gunboats, shore works, all arranged to make the harbour mouth a killing ground. Several British ships grounded despite all precautions. Defiance did not. Guided by the night soundings, she reached her assigned station opposite the southern end of the Danish defense. At 10 o'clock, the signal came. Engage. The Battle of Copenhagen began.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.